allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I wanted to see if there would be a motion to amend the agenda to add 2 recommended appointments under the heading Appointments and Resignations.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those 2 items will be added. For public audience tonight, Joan.
Joan Coe, 26 Wickham Drive. On October 16, 2019, the Police Commission had a regular meeting where the agenda reflected all agenda items except executive session, which was approved to add to the agenda. The minutes of the meeting does not reflect who was present at the session and the reason for executive session. This is in violation of the Freedom of Information Act. Commissioners Mike Long, Ed Cosgrove, and Jim Fleming have served the public in government positions. According to the CAA, Connecticut Airport Authority, Mike Long is a board member. Mike Long served on the Board of Selectmen and is on the Democratic Town Committee. Mike Long has served in many political capacities. Mike Long is an attorney and should be versed in Freedom of Information Act. Jim Fleming was a Simsbury state senator for decades and is now serving as president of CAR, Connecticut Automobile Retailers Association, a political position. He too should be versed in the Freedom of Information Act. It appears that police commissions decided to obfuscate the reason for going into executive session since after much questioning, Mike Long stated that it was about, quote, a letter from Sergeant Jason Trombley, end quote, who was about to be terminated from the police department. This is a lie, since there was no letter presented. It appears that Mike Long had already written the motion for terminating Sergeant Trombley and distributed it to the commissioners in 3 minutes in executive session. Since these commissioners serve at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen, they should be asked to resign since truthfulness is most important in public service, and according to Chief Bolter, lying is a reason for termination. On November 6, 2019, the Police Commission had a special meeting with an agenda listing possible action on disciplinary hearing regarding Sergeant Trombley, end quote. In a meeting of less than 3 minutes, a motion was read to terminate Sergeant Jason Trombley, and a vote was taken without any discussion. All members of the audience supporting Sergeant Trombley were there to support him. They all departed from the room and remained in the hall adjacent to the dispatch area. A few moments later, a 911 call came into dispatch that pedestrians were hit by a car in front of the post office and broadcasted in the building. Many of Sergeant Trombley's friends were police officers and immediately left the building to help the victims. Sergeant Trombley was the first responder on the scene moments after the call and moments after he was terminated from the police department. Both Lifestar and ambulance were called to the scene where the accident victims lay on Hop Meadow Street in very serious condition. During this time, both Chief Bolter and Town Manager Maria Caparoli were in Chief Bolter's office and never appeared at the accident scene. When Chief Bolter was apprised of the accident, the first thing he said was, quote, is it someone we know, end quote. Does it matter? Shame on Chief Bolter. After the ambulance and Lifestyle left, Chief Bolter went to his car in Town Hall parking lot and left the area through the back of the building. Hop Meadow Street was considered a crime scene and was closed to traffic after the accident victims were taken to the hospital to continue with the investigation. On October 8, 2019, Patty Snedeker filed a citizen complaint against Officer Gray and Sergeant T-Bolt describing the shoddy investigation of her 911 call that took 6 hours to find her deceased sister that was just feet away from the officer in the master bedroom bathroom with music playing and lights on. On October 23rd, Chief Bolter responded to her letter by characterizing the oversight as a momentary lapse in thoroughness. If Chief Bolter's thorough investigation did not include any tests to determine his visual deficiencies or whether his hearing was impaired. A, quote, momentary lapse appears to get you out of jail free. This is the poster that I made. On October 29th, Patty Snedeker filed a complaint to the police commission for a hearing on her concerns, and she was not satisfied with Chief Bolter's explanation. She has not heard from the police commissioner for a hearing date. I would like to inform the Board of Selectmen that as a result of my Freedom of Information request for the audio tapes of Chief Bolter questioning police officers as part of the police internal investigations affair, I have received 3 tapes that I have posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at JoanCo, and Newsfeed on Facebook for everyone to review. Since Chief Bolter was appointed chief, he has been consumed with investigating officers in the police department. The termination of Sergeant Jason Trumbley instills the fear of intimidation and punitive actions by Chief Bolter that has led to poor morale within the police department. All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at JoanCo, and Newsfeed on Facebook. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Joan. Would anyone else like to speak in public audience tonight? Yes, Helen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Helen Peterson, 20 Longview Drive, and also a member of the Open Space Committee. On Friday, October 25th, just 2+ weeks ago or so, I had the privilege of being present at the ceremony inducting our Belden Forest into the Old Growth Forest Network. Attending as the presenter of the designation was Dr. Joan Maloof, founder of the network, a naturalist, researcher, professor emeritus, and author. Her life's work identifies the importance of preserving these treasured forests where all generations can experience native biodiversity, not only by understanding the forest as necessary to our health and well-being, but to be near enough to feel the forest, to be close and often. Her vision is to designate one old-growth forest in each county across the whole country. It's nearing 25 designations to date. They have to be readily accessible to each of us. That is her philosophy. Not necessary now to travel across the states, across the country, for the life-affirming experience of being within an old-growth forest. If we were to look out the back windows of this building, Belden Forest spans across the ridge, 40+ acres, just a trek away from the middle of our town. Simsbury is known in general to be in the forefront of land preservation, with almost 1/3 of the town conserved. Having a piece of old-growth forest unaltered by humans, and they are very rare, is even more unique as it is proven exponentially more important and of greater value ecologically than younger forests. Also in attendance at the ceremony, and he was one of the speakers as well, was Eric Hammerling, presently director of the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. It's a nonprofit preservation group over a century old. Eric's comments inspired me to come and speak to you tonight. He knows Simsbury very well, having served as director of the Farmington River Watershed Association for a number of years, based here in Simsbury. In his comments, Eric referenced Simsbury in a very special way as being, quote, the center of conservation in Connecticut, and perhaps in New England, unquote. And not only because we have successfully conserved almost 1/3 of our natural environment, he went on to cite other reasons that I would like to share with you. He told of Gifford Pinchot, an American forester born right here in Simsbury in 1865, known as the father of conservation in America, and he went on to serve as the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service. I'd like to share a quote of Pinchot's. It was made about 100 years ago. Quote, preservation means the wise use of the earth and its resources for the lasting good of man. That unless we practice conservation, Those who come after us will have to pay the price of misery, degradation, and failure for our progress and prosperity. Pretty strong sentiments, but how true today. The sycamore growing by the river at the bridge commemorates Pinchot and his work. It's a champion tree, largest in Connecticut, the largest sycamore in New England, approaching 300 years old, right here in Simsbury. Eric Hammerling went on to cite that the Connecticut Forest and Park Association, the oldest nonprofit conservation organization in Connecticut, was established in 1895 with Reverend Horace Winslow hosting the first meeting at his house on the corner of Winslow Place, right in Weetag. The Farmington River Watershed Association was also established right here in Weetag in 1953 as the first sub-watershed group in Connecticut. And then we can't forget the presence of the McLean Game Refuge, and now the designation of the old-growth forest of Belden Forest, the first one in Connecticut. Several of you attended that ceremony, but I speak tonight only to thank you, the Board of Selectmen, but to congratulate you, not only to thank you, but to congratulate you for your visionary leadership in supporting this lasting effort for our community. I'm proud of you, and I have an important postscript. This effort would not even have happened without the tireless work of Susan Massino, a singularly visionary activist right in our midst in Simsbury. I thank her, and I heartily congratulate her as well. Now we're preparing for a pretty important birthday coming up. And I wanted to share all of this with you here tonight, but using this bully pulpit, I thought I would like to share it with the greater community in collective pride. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks, Mom.
Anybody else for public audience tonight?
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on then to our first presentation. We have two, and the first is from the Recycling Committee. Mary Turner, who's the chair of
I didn't hear a
Recycling,
word you said, I'm sorry.
will present the award. I'm glad you're plugged back in.
I got it.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is, I did some napkin math, this is the 22nd year of this award?
Yes, going on for some time. Would like to move this over so that I can get the recipient up here as well.
Sure.
Is that possible?
There we go. That's even easier.
Hi, Melissa. Working smart. Closer to the door.
The recycling committee.
smarter than we are.
Mary Turner, 11 Garden. Sure. The recycling committee is pleased to present its annual recycling award to the community volunteer, Walter Banziff. Wally is a retired 33-year veteran of the Simsbury Volunteer Fire Department. He is a volunteer at Old Newgate Prison and Copper Mine, and a member of the Terriffill Water Commission. Wally is a professional engineer, retired in 2006, and from teaching electrical engineering at the University of Hartford. Over the 2019 swap shop season, covering Saturdays from April through October, Wally volunteered for manager duties for 14 shifts. In addition to serving at the swap shop, he assisted in collecting and delivering materials that were recycled in exchange for funds for the continued support of the swap shop. He also helped with our affiliate program, which is a recycling committee's program to reduce the use of single-use bottled water. Wally is fully committed to the principles of recycling and to the mission of the swap shop, in keeping with useful household items from becoming the part of the waste stream. I am very pleased and honored to present to you Walter Banziff.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much.
no such thing as a bad short speech, so I'll try to make it a good speech. This has been one of the few things in my life where I enjoyed doing it and I didn't get in trouble for doing it. And that's, well, except a few times. But, it's really a worthwhile endeavor. If you are familiar with the swap shop and the transfer station, it's a great opportunity. You have a toaster, you bring it there, it works. Someone needs a toaster, they get it, doesn't go into the waste stream. It's wonderful. I love meeting the people. We have quite a few fascinating people in town. Some are really, it's great when they come by, others, it's great when they leave. But most of them are in the first category. So Mary has been a great inspiration on I guess, the image of a bulldog on the affiliate program. It was going to happen. We knew that. It just was a matter of when and her determination. So thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure. I look forward to next season.
Hey, thank you. Okay.
I forgot something. I should have added that not only to thank you and to congratulate you for your support of this designation, I should also have included the town staff and administration for their support and the volunteers that participated.
Very nice. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Helen.
Shouldn't have been remiss.
No, appreciate that. Our next presentation, I'll ask Ed LaMontagne and Alan. Alan, are you going to be part of the presentation?
I go after the boss.
Okay, sounds good. So Ed is Chair of Aging and Disability, and we're going to get an update on the loan locker concept, which was shared with us, I want to say, about 6 months ago.
Good evening. So last spring, Alan Needham came before the Aging Disability Commission, floated an idea about the establishment of a durable medical equipment loan program. And as you all know, our commission does not shy away from any proposal or program that benefits those individuals that we serve. So we started working on the development of what was termed a loan locker. So in the beginning, we were in the proverbial dark tunnel with regard to trying to find a location for the loan locker. Finally, we saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and that could not have been done without the assistance from the town. So I'd like to thank First Selectman Eric Wellman, Cheryl Cook, who is the liaison to the Aging Disability Commission, Marie Capriola, Town Manager, Deputy Town Manager Melissa Appleby, Christine Formanek, Director of Social Services, and Tom Taberski, Director of Cultural Parks and Recreation. Also during this time, we developed a team, including the aforementioned town representatives, that would develop and nurture this concept into a loan locker. Team includes Alan Needham, who has done an exemplary job of researching, developing required forms, procedures, and all the other aspects to establish the loan locker. And Gene Miles, who is a registered physical therapist, who will ensure that the medical equipment is safe, clean, operational, and myself. She's not ensuring that I'm safe, clean, and operational. I meant that I am part of the team. So, but I'm going to let Alan describe in more detail the journey we've been on and how we've gotten to this point. That didn't come out.
So I'm trying to access to all the stuff you've already said.
Just wore the same sweater.
It's the first time we haven't coordinated something. Alan Needham, 2 Basswood Lane. I'll try to be brief. That's easier now that Ed just stole all my thunder. So the loan locker, I think by now is pretty well understood by everybody, but briefly, our intention is to loan out donated used durable medical equipment, wheels, chairs, transfer chairs, commodes, canes, tub seats, walkers, rollators, to those people in need of this type of equipment at no charge. Wasted DME can be found in many homes as well as rehab and retirement facilities and my garage. Just today, somebody read about it in the paper and dropped some stuff off in my driveway, so I came home to find a commode. Unsigned. Ed said donated equipment will be verified as serviceable and cleaned before being loaned out. We asked Gene over here to come up with a service or cleaning protocol. and she really went to work on it. We've got it down to a science, I think. We know what to get and how to do it. We've spent a year working out the details and have only been held up, as Ed said, by a lack of a space to dispense and store the equipment. Well, it appears now that needed space is available at the Apple Barn, thanks to Maria and Melissa and Eric and the encouragement of the board. I think the space is going to be almost perfect. Tom Taberski, our new landlord, has given us the rules, which we will abide by. He did allow us to sneak a little bit of equipment in because we had an hurry up donation from McLean, thanks to Gene, and we needed somewhere to put it, so he let us stuff it up against a wall. I don't think getting equipment is going to be a problem. I really don't. As I say, you've got some, Ed, and Gene is going to keep her eyes open. I've got some stuff. I think we're going to be a pipeline for that kind of thing. In particular, I want to thank the first selectman who, for a year, has been facilitating, suggesting, and advising us in ways that made this project possible. I got a nice email from Mike over here that was very encouraging. I appreciate that. So I want to those at home, if you want to donate or borrow equipment, you would call 860-658-3244. Again, that's 860-658-3244, and leave a message. One of our volunteers will call you back to coordinate it. You can also email simsburyloanlocker@gmail.com. That address wasn't taken. Believe that? That again is simsburyloanlocker@gmail.com, and we'll get back to you. Also, we're on the web, www.simsbury-ct.gov/loanlocker. So our remaining needs are volunteers. Ed scuffed up yesterday, 2. You got 1? Okay, there's 3 of us. We're getting there. It's an easy volunteer. It really is. It's just this. We'll ask people to tell us what days of the week they might be available. They don't have to be available every time, but they might be available. When we get a message, one of us will contact the donor or borrower. When might you be available? I might be available Tuesday or Thursday afternoon. We see who looks good for that time. Send them a message. All you have to do as volunteers, call that person, set up the time you'd like to meet them at the Apple Barn, show up at the Apple Barn, give them the goods, have them sign a waiver. You'll be at the Apple Barn 15 minutes. So it's really an easy thing to volunteer for. As a minister, I know you used to say it's an easy way to get to heaven. So besides the volunteers, maybe a little signage. We'll have to see how we're going to play that. So the space is supposed to be available December 1st. First thing we'll do is go in there and clean it up a little bit. I think we can be in business in 10 days. We're ready to go. All we need is you guys say, okay, and we'll take care of it. So is there any questions? People understand how it works? Easy enough. Okay, thank you very much.
Great. Great.
Thanks.
I know a lot of people have been thanked here, but thank you so much to everyone who's been part of this. This is just such a nice service we're going to be able to offer to our residents. And like so many things in Simsbury, it's because of the work of volunteers. We're going to move on now to my first selectman's report. The first item is the school facilities master plan. So our school district is in the process of completing a facility study. Since the last public forum that took place in June, Tecton Architects was asked to create a series of planning options for the Simsbury school facilities. There's going to be a public forum on Wednesday, November 20th at the Simsbury Public Library, starting at 7 o'clock in the evening. It's an opportunity to learn more about the options being considered and to provide your input. This is a process that's being driven by our Board of Education and will eventually intersect with the Board of Selectmen, which is responsible for approving capital projects. I appreciate the residents who've reached out to me with questions and concerns about the options under consideration. Considering a change of this magnitude is not an easy thing, and I have interest in the outcome, not just as your first selectman, but as the father of a child in one of our elementary schools. Like many of our residents, I'm still learning about the options and taking in information. I join our Board of Education in its commitment to a transparent process where timely information is shared and input is appreciated. I trust in the collective wisdom of this community to arrive at a fiscally responsible plan that is in the best interest of our children. Thank you to the VFW Post 1926 and American Legion Post 84 for organizing a beautiful Veterans Day ceremony this past Monday. At the ceremony, longtime Simsbury resident Len Lanza was honored following his induction into the Connecticut Veterans Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame recognizes veterans not just for their service in the armed forces, but also their contributions to their communities in the years since. Please join me in congratulating Len Lanza on this incredible honor. The nonprofit A Promise to Jordan is holding a community event on the field at the Simsbury High School from 1:30 to 4:30 p.m. on Monday, November 18th. The event will feature a poster project with more than 140 pictures of the thousands of young lives lost in Connecticut due to addiction. There'll be food trucks, music, and giveaways. The event is free and it's open to everyone. You don't have to be part of the high school. A Promise to Jordan's mission focuses on raising awareness and reducing the stigma of issues surrounding substance abuse and addiction. I'll turn to Maria now for the town manager's report.
Thank you. Looks like we're sharing tonight.
Nope.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So a couple of save the dates for the board. This Saturday, excuse me, sorry. This Saturday morning from 9 to noon, we will be having the goal setting session and discussion for the Board of Selectmen. We'll have a very light breakfast, excuse me, available for you. That will be at the Terrafill Room at the library. The swearing-in ceremony will be December 2nd at 6 p.m. at Ena Memorial Hall. We will have formal invitations going out shortly. And the third save the date is the tri-board budget meeting between the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and Board of Education. That will be held on December 3rd at 5:45. We were holding December 5th at 5:45 as a backup date. I do anticipate we'll be able to release that date in about a day or two, but we'll let you know for certain. For departmental news and notes, the Simsbury Farms Ice Rink is now open for the season. Public skating sessions are on the weekends, on Saturdays from 2:15 to 4:15, from 7:30 to 9 p.m., and on Sundays from 2:15 to 4:15. We also have weekday open skating available between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. From engineering, we have received notice from the DOT that they will be rehabbing the bridge on Hot Meadow right near the EBAD Dino Nobel property. That's likely to happen during the 2022 construction season, but that is a major bridge rehab, so that's going to be quite an endeavor. They have reached out to us in the fire district, so our engineering department and our fire district have been the leads working with the DOT on this particular project. We've also looped in Dino Nobel. We think that's really important since they are going to be impacted. But we wanted to make sure that this project does remain, that we have good access for public safety, that traffic can still move through. It's a very tight area, so it's going to be a bit of a tough project. They are having an initial public information session this coming December. It's going to be December 12th at 7 p.m. That will be at the public library. So folks who are interested in learning a little bit more about the project, we would encourage you to attend that meeting. And from Public Works, they had the final household hazardous waste collection of the season. We had 817 cars that came. That was up from 563 at the last event. We collected over 17,000 pounds of e-waste, which is just amazing when you think about that, which is up from just under 6,000 pounds of e-waste in June. So it was a really successful event, and kudos to the Public Works team for coordinating that. And a final reminder, Simsbury Celebrates will be coming up at the end of the month on November 30th from 5 to 8:30 p.m. in downtown Simsbury. We have also provided the road closing notice that will apply during that event. A portion of Hot Meadow will be closed between 5 and 8 p.m. that evening. So we will do our best to get the word out, but wanted to try to start doing that early.
Great. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Moving on to Selectmen action. Item A is tax refund requests. Is there a motion effective November 13th, 2019 to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $2,600.39 and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the tax refunds?
So moved.
Second.
Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Item B is a proposed lien for relocation payments for 15 Carriage Drive. About this time last year, the town incurred the cost of relocating a resident because the home that this person was living in was deemed unsafe. The Connecticut Uniform Relocation Act requires that towns reimburse the relocation costs of tenants displaced as a result of municipal health and safety orders. At the time, the town incurred costs of nearly $4,000 to relocate this resident, and what we're considering tonight is whether to place a lien on the property equal to the town's direct expense in this process. Maria, is there anything else that you wanted to add for context?
No, I think that covered it really,
Okay.
really quite well.
Were there any questions that board members have? Is there a motion effective December 13th, 2019, to place a lien in the amount of $3,998.70 against the property at 15 Carriage Drive, Simsbury, Connecticut, pursuant to Connecticut General Statute Section 8-268A, in order to reimburse the town for the costs associated with relocation assistance provided to the prior tenant of that property?
So move. Second.
Any conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Item C is discussion on the public recognition space to foster pride within community organizations. So the Board of Selectmen and myself as first selectman am occasionally approached by different groups asking us to highlight civic causes or groups within the community. Just as one example, we're asked to raise awareness about autism by lighting Eno Blue. We were asked to paint a rainbow crosswalk during the month of June in celebration of LGBTQ Pride Month, two things that we did. But one of the questions we've gotten throughout the process is about creating a way to recognize and celebrate the many organizations that contribute to Simsbury. And I know one idea that came from Cheryl is the idea of a rock that there's a model for this on the UConn campus.
There is.
That's in our packet. And Cheryl, what do you want to add to this item?
Well, there's also a rock at the high school.
That's right.
So I know that our students have participated in this before. It helps foster school spirit, it gives some of the school groups a chance. We used to have a bigger space for students to express themselves, but now we don't have that any longer because of what it was. But while we were in the process of doing the Rainbow Crosswalk, a lot of people brought up different groups that, would like to just express their pride in the different groups that they belong to, whether it's pink for breast cancer awareness or purple for Alzheimer's patients or blue for autism, or just, messages of, peace, hope, love, whatever it is. It's just a way that other communities have used to have a public space. The key is how you control who gets to paint it. And I think we could find a way to have either a group and, I don't know, I'm just going to throw the Community for Care out there, but I'm not saying it has to be that. A subgroup of this board, that would take suggestions, maybe there's a month, during the warmer months, autism awareness can do blue paintings but you have to come through town hall, apply for your month, and then you get a chance to do your expression of whatever it is that's, that you'd like to show. So that's where that came from. Maria was very helpful in finding the Yukon policy for painting a rock. And it doesn't have to be a rock. I suggested that as a way, because I know we have one at the high school, and I know that the kids all like having their moment of school spirit on the rock, and I just thought maybe we could talk about that.
Right. So there's, Mike.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think just for the conversation, let's talk about this specific idea, but also if there are other ways to accomplish the similar goal.
Right.
That doesn't involve a rock.
It doesn't involve a rock.
talk
Well, as I
about
said,
that
I
too.
just throw that out there as
Yeah.
a suggestion.
What were you thinking, Mike?
I like the idea of a rock. When I was reading our agenda and going through this, and I'll be honest, Cheryl did
mentioned in passing over the last couple month or so this concept to me. I was trying to think what a fence or something else, but I think a rock is a little, frankly, tougher to move. It's more permanent. And I just like the idea, the concept of a month, and I would envision that having this particular rock in a particular spot painted a different color would actually start a dialogue. Oh, it's this color. I wonder what that's for. You know, maybe I like the idea of a group that brings it forward to us. There's some kind of form they fill out. And then ultimately we would approve it, I would envision. And I see that as a good thing, that gets a dialogue going.
The natural place to park, there is we can certainly organize and orchestrate logistically the arrangement of who does it. I think the natural place to park the rock, no, but park the responsibilities with Tom, continue to heap things on Tom Tyberski, Parks and Rec.
Actually, Tom Roy is pretty excited about the rock.
I'm all for the idea. Again, that's Mike. You make a really good point about fostering conversation around exactly what that and bringing light to whichever, especially amongst I know my kids saw an orange rock painted in the middle of Simsbury. They would, why is there an orange rock? I think also the concept of rock is if and when, and I hope it doesn't ever, if we do move forward with something like this, but if and when something does sort of lose a little bit of steam, you can move a rock, put it someplace else, and it's not something gets in it. I think you may have alluded to at the high school, we used to have the kickboard, right? That's what we used to paint, right? Chris, you remember those days?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I was alluding
Right,
to.
Sean. So we had that, but I would ask us also, just off the rock, I'm going to continue to use the word rock in everything I say, that off the rock, there may be something someplace, there might be something in Simsbury tucked away that's not being utilized. Maybe it's in public works, maybe it's in a hall somewhere, a closet, something that is more representative of what our town is. I'm thinking to myself, if there was a mini Hubline Tower someplace that somebody had made or something, and then maybe that's what gets painted, because it's not only is it representative of the group, but it's also about Simsbury, and Simsbury making a statement too. So I just don't want to stop the process up, but if we have maybe some people submit some ideas, there's something sitting someplace that's an old cupola or something, that's what I'm thinking like, so.
Well, part of the reason for using a rock for something like this, as you've probably seen at the high school, is it's always just a rock. If you decide you're not going to paint it,
right.
or, you need
Good
to paint
point.
it over, or it's just a rock. It keeps it away from, trees, water, other things that, we might not want to put paint on every month, but it is a rock. So that was the only reason I threw that out there. For me personally, I love when we light the windows in blue. I think that, there's other ways we can do that, but, it's one of those sort of universal things where everybody would have a chance.
And if you think about Vincente's bicycle at the.
Right,
I
exactly.
mean, I don't want to paint, I'm not promoting you paint
we're
that.
not putting-
But I'm saying something's a statement like that encourages, fosters conversation. We do these kinds of things, so this is
Right.
not a stretch.
And this isn't really meant to be, I love Vincente's sculptures, but those are public art. And
Yes.
and I would in no way want to embrace and I think we have to draw a distinction between public art and painting a rock. It's, yes, it's
I'm all for it.
it's an expression of our,
Chris? No, I'm totally receptive to this. I think it's a great idea. Cheryl, thanks for, bringing it up. Just one thing, to me, I'm not wedded to a rock, so I'm open
Yeah,
to
it could be
creativity.
other.
Just one observation, is I always felt with the kickboard versus the rock, it allowed, because there was more space, it actually allowed for more artistry. It's kind of a stronger statement of what the statement was. And so just be cognizant that small space doesn't allow as much of a projection of intent.
Tom's thinking like boulder.
Right, so that's the only thing I throw out, so.
Yeah, no, you're right, though. It's,
My only thing is let's make sure we craft the policy such that we don't trample on the First Amendment.
Yes. Yeah. Good point. So I think, Maria, I don't think any formal action is needed tonight, but I think the next step would be to craft a policy. And what help would you want for figuring out what the right item is? I don't want to just say, hey, staff, you figure that out.
Sure. I can bring it back to perhaps our traffic authority group and also include parks in the conversation. We did have somewhat of a similar conversation when we received ideas and suggestions around possible trail art. And, could we have some sort of mural that people would be able to paint that parks might help with maintaining? So I can definitely, at least at a staff level, generate some ideas and suggestions that we could bring back to you. Is it a rock? Is it another, structure of some sort? We could also bring some possible locations for you all to take a look at. So we could definitely kind of work on just offering out some suggestions, just as a starting point.
Yeah, and there could be a component of community input if we reached out via our channels to see if others had ideas. That could be something we
Definitely.
do.
Absolutely.
I think of it a little bit like Google, where sometimes you go to the Google homepage and you see that Google's spelled funny, and then you click on it and you learn what it is. And I think that, as Mike said, I love the idea that this will get people to learn things about things going on that they didn't know.
Yeah.
So it's neat.
Great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Item D is looking at the work plan for the Economic Development Commission. So by ordinance, we need to give them new things to work on by the end of the month. So there's nothing that we need to finalize tonight, but I did want to kick off the conversation. As you know, we are meeting on Saturday, and I think that there may be things coming out of our goal-setting session that could also make sense for EDC. But I did want to have a conversation preliminarily. I passed out some recommendations from the EDC, so we asked them, what do you think would be worthwhile to work on? And they gave us 3 things. So we could discuss those, and then any other items that members think are worthwhile. And I think we can just start the process of getting those on the table, and then formalize that at our next meeting. So I guess I'll begin with the recommendations from the EDC. And I think the first one's really interesting. This is around supporting entrepreneurs. So right now there is some work going on to update the marketing materials for the EDC website. But what they're proposing is to expand this into a full-blown look at what it would take for an entrepreneur to come to Simsbury and start their own business. So looking at things like infrastructure requirements, Wi-Fi, 5G network access. And they have a couple of members on the committee who, are in this, category by experience and have some interest working on it. So I think that's one possibility. Just since the public doesn't have access to this document, I'll read the other 2. Developing and tracking feedback that we get from businesses regarding issues and concerns. So they've held a couple of roundtables where they've gathered input, and I think what they're suggesting is creating a repository to categorize and codify that input, and hopefully develop some recommendations on how we can, move forward on things that make sense to move forward on. And then the final is creating a town survey to baseline what residents see as strengths and weaknesses. Sean?
I'll go in reverse order. So we've done the survey thing a bunch of times. We've done charrettes. We've got more studies than we know what to do with for the last decade. So I'm not wild about spending money on another study. I do like the suggestion of digging in. We had the Deep Blue or whatever it was, Great Blue study on the senior center, but it did ask about economic development, our strengths, character of the community. So I think a lot of that work has been done. And I want to be careful with that because, again, if the residents think of strengths and weaknesses, how does that translate to economic development? It's good information to have, but again, I'm kind of missing how we connect that to the business world, because folks are going to say they hate the apartments, they love the apartments, they love the open space, they open the space, they love the trails. We've got that information. So I'm not discounting it, but I'm just questioning the action item that comes out of that, and I would probably want to hear more about that. On the feedback and track and develop feedback, not to be flippant, but that's the point of EDC, right? To gather feedback from the business community and do something with it. At least that's why I thought we convened them. So it is to take care and foster the businesses that we have. So I very much do agree and support with that. And then I just want to be careful on number 1 with the support entrepreneurs. I think it's a great idea, but that marketing material was approved to rebrand what we have And I don't want to start pulling away from that. That's an approved initiative that was already defined, that was already scoped for that $19,000 that the Board of Finance approved. So that needs to happen. If there's additional work for branding, for websites and otherwise, I think that's great, but we need to talk more about that. And I don't want to start commingling projects that are already doing. My thought there.
Yeah, I think that the intent with this one is that, yes, that's in flight, but then looking at more holistically at the other needs of entrepreneurs.
Okay. Again, I would want to hear more about it. It sounds like a good idea, but I think there's more meat to it. Are we talking about having an entrepreneurial onboarding process? Are we talking about just developing the needs up front? Okay, so 5G, we're not putting in 5G towers as a town. So, okay, what does that mean? I would just want to hear that one baked out a little bit further in terms of how does that align with our priorities? Where's the spend? What's the potential benefit? Is it just a marketing packet? Is it an onboarding process? Is it a proactive, process to go get entrepreneurs? It sounds like a good idea at first, but I guess I'm not appreciating the depth or the direction that it would go in at this point. Does that make sense?
It does.
I'm not sure I'm being critical, I just, I don't.
I think even an action item, if we talk about this at our next meeting, could be for them to say, hey, we're interested in this in theory, why don't you scope this a little bit and come back with, because we also don't want to send volunteers on a path that's not going to lead anywhere.
Yeah.
What do others think?
I'm just going to sort of retread on what we said last time when we had the presentation by the EDC about doing some more industry-specific type feedback. Having, say, our restaurant group get together, talk about what matters to them, have our retail group get together, talk about what matters to them. I think that would help you pinpoint more specifically needs that probably differ from industry to industry. And there may be other, I just throw those out as an example, but it seems like you could target that a little bit more now that you've done two that are very, sort of general.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could do the general office, people who run the doctor's offices and things like that, what do they need? That type of drilling down a little bit.
I think that's great because it's taking something they're already doing. They're holding these meetings, but it's making it more focused
Making
around
it a little more
industries, yeah.
focused on what they're concerned about.
I like the supporting the entrepreneurs, but I also think we probably have a number of entrepreneurs who are in town now, working out of their home, and they kind of want to take that next step. And to me, you take care of your customers that are already here. I think it sounds nice to think that somebody may want to move to town to be an entrepreneur and look for an office, but my assumption is they're probably going to want the lower hanging fruit will be the people that are already here. And this would also probably end up being some kind of monetary compensation. So we need to put something in the budget if we're going to do any of these things, and should plan on that going in. Years ago, we had infrastructure dollars, and over time, we stopped doing that. I think probably the most important thing to me would actually be number two, because by focusing on whatever impediment there is to someone doing business in town, the more you can make that easier, better, more seamless. I think it's a good thing. In years past, when I was on planning, we would hold special meetings to facilitate moving their plans forward so that we didn't become an impediment, because time's money, and more so for a business, especially if you got to have your lawyers and all these other people come in for your presentations. And I think Sean's point about number 3 about the survey, we probably have a number of surveys, and we'll also get information, I think, in doing 1 and 2 of what your existing pool of people are looking for. So why reinvent the wheel? Not that it's not potentially good information, but much like the work plan ideas where they rank them, instead of focusing on the 1s and 2s, focus on the 5s that people really want. Those are my thoughts.
Okay. Other thoughts on these?
Is that one more quick comment?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
We did this last year, right? We did the economic work plan ideas. In fact,
Yep.
review previous economic development studies and plans, implement ideas and action items where feasible or appropriate. Was numbers, we had 6 supporters for that. That was our only high. Meaning all 6 of us
I think,
voted for that, right?
Sean, I think that was also pointed almost out as one of the pillars of the setting up that group as a whole, was one of their very first chartered amendment and chartered responsibilities, was doing that, let alone it being important to us in that document. So I think that's been said now 3 to 4 different ways. And of course, these are volunteers, so I appreciate that, but I think we've got enough data there to go back and call over, and that's one of the first chartered distillations of that group, so.
Yeah, I guess I'm all for setting the charge, but we probably need an update, and it sounds like we don't, on, we already set the charge, what was done, what wasn't done, and what needs to be continued, and do we want to reprioritize those efforts or change them?
Maria?
Right.
Some of that was in the annual report materials that they had submitted for your meeting at the end of October.
Okay.
Particularly around the strategic vision piece. There were a handful of items, that they had identified as possible projects. Some of them are underway, particularly, for example, an update of the zoning regulations. Some of the items that they did recommend would require a charter revision, such as consolidating the number of land use bodies. So there were a couple that are sort of, I think, flagged for future charter revision, and a couple of smaller projects that are currently being worked on either by the zoning commission or at a staff level.
So instead of beating this up tonight, we're going to take this under advisement and talk about it more on Saturday.
Exactly.
Can I just put in a little plug here for something you might want to talk about on Saturday is how the EDC could assist in marketing the 350 celebration.
Yeah, and there's also been some conversation about how to better just connect the EDC to the 350th work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Good idea.
thought I'd put that bug out there, and possibly, maybe the EDC could invite the 350 to a meeting in January to discuss this.
That's good.
And just a
Smart
quick
guy.
question, a follow-up. Bob Crowther had reached out to me today, and excuse me, at your last meeting, there seemed to be an interest possibly in some benchmarking work to see what other towns are doing in regards to economic development. We did receive a really nice report that the town of Windsor had done within the last few years, specifically around business incentives that they've been using as part of their research for that project. But we just weren't sure if there were other areas, like specific areas that you would like that group to look at in terms of benchmarking with other communities. Was there just sort of, where was that maybe train of thought going?
Are you,
Just trying to get a little bit of feedback for Bob and the group. They're meeting on Wednesday, so any feedback on that particular piece is helpful. Or, if you're like, no, actually we're all set with benchmarking, that's fine. But Bob had just, asked about that particular piece since you had mentioned it at your last meeting.
What did we say? I can't
that-
remember what I did yesterday.
That's okay, that you might be interested in having them do some benchmarking in terms of economic development, what other communities are doing. Are there any sort of lessons learned that we might be able to take from them? We do, again, have a really good report that Windsor did relatively recently around business incentives, but were there maybe other areas that you were interested in having them benchmark?
I don't know if this is helpful, but the first thing that comes to mind is I think it's often helpful on almost anything that they work on to look at what are other communities in Connecticut doing. And I know that's not specific, but I always think that it's helpful to understand what our neighbors are doing.
Are there infrastructure programs in other communities that we could look at? Because, as Mike said, we did used to have one, which doesn't seem to be funded anymore, but
Yeah.
maybe that's something they should look at.
Well, and I think by looking at the towns that surround us, and maybe you go too deep, in effect, that's our competition for people coming into Simsbury, very possibly, or staying in town. And I think we want to be careful to not be competing against Greenwich or somebody that, I don't see someone choosing them over us, bless you. But at the same point, we want to be cognizant, and every town has different strengths and weaknesses. So we just need to be honest about ourselves.
We're gonna have a cooler rock soon, sounds like.
We are.
Saturday.
To keep the rock analogies going, we gotta push the rock on something from the ADC standpoint. So some of the stuff that we prioritize, some of the stuff we prioritize low, that might be cheap, so the wayfinding, again, I'm gonna beat this wayfinding thing to death today and on Saturday. It's great if we have it. If nobody knows where the hell it is, what was the point of having it? And if people can't get there, they don't know where to park.
Have come full circle on wayfinding since last year.
Yeah, again, I think we need I think we need to do some big strategic stuff and some quick wins to build some momentum, bring additional ideas in, bring additional visibility to it, and push that rock up the hill.
Somebody showed me the light of signs showed me the signs.
Yeah. So I like the idea that, if I'm understanding what you're saying, basically give them some bigger strategic things and then some things that they can get a
Yes.
quick win on and
Yes.
it's tangible. Yeah.
Like, by the time we talk about the budget, I want to see how much it's going to cost to improve the wayfinding in the downtown area. I don't even know what that means because I don't know how we would improve it. I'm not a wayfinding expert. But is it 15 grand, 20 grand, 50 grand? Let's start talking about funding it. Let's get it in there as a line item.
Like a place to start might be, Eric, we talked, calling the DOT, right? I'm sure that the DOT has standard levels of signage, right? But maybe there's a side program where we don't know that working with the DOT, that's how Westport got the unique Victorian signage that it has, and through some program or something, right? And that could be a quick win. And that's also a learning process too for them.
We're gonna need at least $5 grand for the name for the new bridge, so, with the size of that sign, so.
I love it. You're never gonna let it go.
Nope.
And let's get some cell phone service that works, because the wayfinding, people
That's
are
gotten
gonna.
better. That's gotten better.
Not on my phone.
All right, so we're gonna do this all again on Saturday.
Saturday.
Sounds good.
It's good stuff.
Okay. Anything else here? All right. We're going to move on to appointments and resignations. Is there a motion effective November 13th, 2019, to appoint Cheryl Cook as an alternate member of the Aging and Disability Commission with a term expiring January 1, 2020?
I'm going to abstain.
Has anybody seen her resume yet? No one's seen her resume. It's not a resume yet.
I have some questions.
Fire away.
I move that with our thanks.
Yeah.
I'll second that heartily.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Cheryl.
With one abstention.
With one abstention. Is there a motion effective November 13th, 2019, to appoint Elizabeth Keppel as a regular member of Culture Parks and Rec Commission with a term expiring January 1, 2020?
So move. Oh,
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Is there any feedback on the minutes from our regular meeting on October 28th? Okay, then they'll stand. Any liaison or subcommittee reports?
I just have one quick reminder about the Sensory Friendly Santa for the Aging and Disability Commission, which will be on December 6th at Eno Hall. Also for Simsbury Celebrates, there will be a 350th anniversary booth at Simsbury Celebrates, so you're going to get your first look at some swag and some stuff, to get excited about the 350th.
Is there swag to purchase?
There is going to be swag to purchase. Few things, it's not going to be the whole thing, but we're going to, give you a little teaser. And then there will be stuff available, online. So it's coming, so stop by the booth, see what's out there, get an idea of what events are coming, and we are very excited to get this rolling.
Great. Sean?
Quick one on our favorite topic. We had an opportunity this past week with Chris Peterson, Maria, the chief, myself, and Gary Wilcox to discuss the proposed anti-feeding ordinance in town. We had, I think, a good discussion. I think we've got some good action items, and recognizing that the ordinance itself, from every expert we've talked to, is not going to solve the problem by itself, but it's important to review making the act of feeding intrusive animals or dangerous animals illegal, because it's currently not illegal in the town. So we are moving forward with coming up with language for that. And to this first selectman's point, there will be ample opportunity for public comment as soon as we bring that language forward, but we thought it was important to actually draft some language and give people something to beat up. We're also looking at additional steps beyond that, resources with DEEP, getting a better understanding of the town or private property owners' options with respect to coyotes, whether it be professional trapping and removal, and whether that's a feasible way to solve or manage the problem as well. A third idea is we're potentially contracting the 2 trash haulers that work in town and discussing the feasibility of accelerating bare barrel implementation, thinking about potential budgetary costs with that, incentives, et cetera. Again, it was an idea that was kicked around, but again, trying to look at this and from many different approaches to see if we can actually put a dent in this problem.
Great.
So more to come on that.
Thank you, Sean.
Did you?
Any other subcommittee reports? Okay. Anything under communication anyone wanted to bring up?
When am I supposed to dress up for picture day?
So that is one item I just wanted to get the board's feedback on, is departing from as much as I would love to see my picture on the empty spot of that wall. No, that's okay. I think that in the new form of government, it makes more sense to do a picture of the full board. That would be, we'd start a new wall in Town Hall. And I just wanted to get the group's feedback on that.
Okay.
And so just for clarity, each new board that's sat has a picture and then just go.
So the example that inspired me is from Farmington. They've got a whole wall of past boards. There's also, I don't know if there's a rule that there has to be a picture, but if we do a picture, I think that doing the full board makes sense to me.
Sounds good.
I think it would be nice.
Okay.
I recommend Sean be put on a work committee to establish
There's no need.
language and ordinance.
Maybe we can get a picture on a rock.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's pros and cons.
Great.
Peterson and I in the middle and everyone else to stay behind
Start
us.
with the next one, right?
Yeah, we're putting Peterson in the back.
Chris and I are feeling a little left out.
All right. Anything else under communication anyone wanted to bring up? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn to executive session with Maria Capriola to discuss the town manager's annual performance review?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Try not to be offended.